By the time the heat began to thin and the light tilted westward, the stillness near the river had taken on a different weight. It was not the quiet that follows a herd's passing, or the pause before wind lifts the grass. This silence pressed low and unmoving, anchored to a shape half hidden in dust and reeds. A male lion lay on his side where the bank crumbled into dry sand, his chest rising only slightly, each breath uneven and delayed. Dust clung to his mane in dull strands, masking the dark gold beneath. Along his flank, the skin was torn open, the wound deep enough to pull at the muscle below. Flies gathered and lifted again, unsettled by the faint twitch of his tail. His ears shifted once, then fell still. There was no warning growl, no lift of the head, only the slow surrender of weight to the ground. The man had been moving steadily along the river's edge, reading tracks the way he always did, letting the land speak first. When the sounds changed, he stopped. The absence registered before the sight. Lions announced themselves even when injured. This one did not. He eased his steps, keeping the wind in his favor, and lowered himself to one knee, careful not to disturb the sand. From where he paused, the lion's breathing could be counted. Shallow. Uneven. A long pull of air followed by a pause that stretched too far. The animal's eyes were open, clouded at the edges, tracking nothing in particular. Once, the lion tried to shift his foreleg and failed, the effort ending in a soft exhale through the nose. The man waited. Time mattered, but so did restraint. He had seen animals rise in sudden fear, wasting what little strength remained. He stayed low, hands open, body angled away, letting the lion read him without challenge. The distance between them remained wide enough to be safe, close enough to see the tremor that ran through the cat's ribs. The wound told part of the story. The mark suggested claws, perhaps from another male, or the sharp horn of prey turned at the wrong moment. Blood had dried along the fur, dark and cracked. The smell of iron hung faintly in the air. Each breath pulled at the injury, and the lion's flank tightened in response. A low sound slipped from the lion's throat, not a growl, more a strained vibration that faded as quickly as it came. The man did not move. He let his presence settle, slow and unthreatening. After a while he murmured, "Easy now." The words were barely sound, carried more by breath than voice. Minutes stretched. Heat shimmered above the sand, and somewhere downstream a bird called, sharp and brief. The lion's tail flicked once more, then lay still. His eyes closed for a moment, opened again, unfocused. The man reached for his radio but stopped, watching the rhythm of breathing change, as if the animal were slipping in and out of the effort to remain conscious. "You're still here," the man said quietly, not expecting an answer. He shifted back, giving space, and finally sent the call for help, keeping his movements measured, predictable. As the sun lowered, light brushed the riverbank in muted copper. Wind moved through the dry grass, lifting dust from the lion's mane and carrying it away. The lion remained where he was, breathing shallowly, the land around him holding its breath as well. Somewhere beyond the bend, the river whispered against stone, indifferent and steady, as evening gathered its cooler shadows along the bank. The space between them remained unchanged, held by caution and the slow passage of minutes. The man shifted his weight only when the sun dipped further, careful that each movement followed the same calm pattern. He did not approach. He did not test the lion's tolerance. Instead, he let the animal decide how much of the moment it could bear. From a pack slung low at his side, he eased out a container and tipped it gently onto the sand, letting water pool where it could be seen and smelled without effort. He slid it forward with the flat of his hand, stopping well short of the lion's reach. Then he leaned back again, lowering his shoulders, eyes softened, posture open. The offering was not an instruction. It was an option. The lion's gaze followed the movement, heavy-lidded but alert. One ear rotated toward the faint sound of water touching sand. His tail twitched once, a short, reflexive motion, then stilled. Breathing continued, uneven but present, the chest lifting with effort and settling again. After a long while, his tongue touched the edge of his mouth, dry and pale, then withdrew. The injury became clearer in the angled light. What had first appeared as a single tear revealed branching damage beneath the fur, the skin pulled apart by force rather than cut cleanly. It was serious, the kind of wound that drained strength with every step. But there was no smell of decay yet, no deep swelling that suggested infection had taken hold. The blood had slowed. The body, though weakened, was still working. The man watched for signs that mattered. The way the lion held his head, not collapsed entirely but resting against the sand. The tension in the forelegs, ready even now to brace if needed. This was not an animal surrendering. It was one conserving what little remained. Wind moved across the riverbed, cooling the air by degrees. Flies lifted and settled again. The lion's eyes closed briefly, then opened, fixing on the water. Slowly, carefully, he shifted his jaw and lowered his head just enough for his tongue to reach the damp sand at the edge of the pool. He lapped once, then again, each movement deliberate, controlled. After a few seconds he stopped, breathing harder, and let his head rest. The man did not react. He did not lean forward or signal success. He remained still, allowing the lion to drink without pressure. The restraint was practiced, shaped by years of knowing when intervention harmed more than helped. Control had no place here. Only time. "It's all right," he said softly. The words meant more to steady himself than to communicate. The lion's ear flicked, acknowledging sound without alarm. As the light thinned, the land began to change its tone. Heat loosened its grip, and the riverbank darkened to softer browns and gray. Somewhere far off, a herd shifted, hooves stirring dust in a low, distant murmur. The lion lifted his head once more, testing the air, then let it fall back, exhausted but aware. Patience stretched into the length of the evening. Help would come, but not yet, and rushing the space between now and then could undo everything. The man stayed where he was, breathing slow, eyes never leaving the rise and fall of the lion's chest. Above them, the sky faded toward amber, and the first cool breath of night passed over the grass, bending it gently toward the river as the wounded lion lay still, alive, waiting. Time continued to widen, not rushing toward any resolution. The man remained where he was until the lion's breathing found a steadier rhythm, until the tension along the shoulders eased just enough to suggest awareness without panic. Only then did he shift, moving one measured step closer, then another, pausing after each to let the animal adjust to the change. The lion noticed. One eye opened more fully, tracking the movement without lifting the head. His tail slid across the sand in a slow arc and stopped. There was no sound from his throat, no baring of teeth. The message was not welcome, but it was not refusal either. It was endurance. The man lowered himself again, keeping his body angled sideways, never directly squared to the lion. At this distance, the wound was unmistakable. The flesh along the flank had split under force, edges raw and swollen, the fur around it stiff with dried blood. The smell was sharp but clean, telling of injury rather than rot. The lion's skin rippled once as a muscle tightened beneath the damage, then relaxed. Carefully, the man reached for clean cloth and water, moving slowly enough that each action could be tracked. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of proximity, from the understanding that trust here was thin and easily broken. He waited until the lion's gaze drifted, then gently poured water over the cloth, letting it soak rather than splash. When he leaned forward, the lion's ears flattened briefly, then eased back. A low breath pushed from the animal's chest, long and controlled. The man stopped, holding his position until the tension passed. Only then did he reach out, touching the cloth first to the fur beside the wound, never directly on it, letting the sensation be known before it mattered. The lion flinched once, a sharp tightening that traveled down his spine, but he did not rise. His jaw clenched, breath hitching, then settling again. The man waited, counting silently, allowing the animal to reclaim stillness before continuing. Each gentle press lifted dust and blood, revealing clean skin beneath. The process was slow, almost meditative, shaped by restraint rather than urgency. "It's okay," the man murmured, barely sound. The lion's eye flicked toward him, then closed again, the lid heavy with exhaustion. As the wound cleared, its depth became clearer. Serious, yes, but clean enough that the body could fight for recovery if given the chance. The man avoided the torn edges, working only where contact caused the least reaction. When the lion's breathing changed, he paused. When the tail twitched, he froze. The balance between them was fragile, built on reading the smallest shifts in muscle and breath. The air itself seemed to hold still. Wind slowed. Even the flies kept their distance for a moment, unsettled by the quiet intensity of the space. The lion's chest rose and fell, each breath a careful effort but steady. His head rested against the sand, mane spreading like a dark halo around it. When the cloth grew heavy, the man drew back, giving space again. He sat on his heels, hands lowered, posture relaxed. The lion opened his eyes fully now, watching, not with challenge but with tired clarity. The distance between them felt smaller, not in steps but in trust. Dusk crept closer, cooling the ground beneath them. Shadows stretched from the reeds, and the riverbank softened in color. The man remained still, breathing in time with the lion as much as he could, letting the moment settle. Above them, the sky dimmed toward blue-gray, and the grass along the river bent gently in the evening wind, as the wounded lion lay breathing, enduring, held in a fragile quiet that neither dared to disturb. The man eased backward, careful to return the space he had taken. His movements were slow, deliberate, shaped by the belief that the moment had reached its natural close. The wound was clean for now, the water offered, the balance intact. He lowered himself again at a distance, eyes still, breath steady, prepared to leave the rest to time and the approaching team. For a few seconds nothing changed. The lion remained where he was, chest rising and falling, head resting against the sand. Then the ground shifted under him. It was subtle at first, a tightening through the shoulders, a gathering of weight. The man froze, not retreating further, not advancing, simply allowing the movement to unfold. With visible effort, the lion drew his forelegs beneath him. His muscles trembled, the injury pulling sharply as he pushed upward. He paused halfway, breath flaring, then continued, lifting his chest off the ground. Sand slid away from his fur. For a moment, it seemed the effort might fail, but he adjusted his stance, spreading weight unevenly, favoring the wounded side without collapsing. The man stayed still, heart measured behind calm posture. This was the most dangerous threshold, when exhaustion and instinct met. He did not reach for anything. He did not speak. The lion stood fully now, tall but unsteady, mane dusted pale by the riverbank. His head remained low, neck extended, eyes scanning the open plain rather than fixing on the man. His tail hung loose, no lash, no stiff arc. He drew in air and released it slowly, then lifted his head just enough to let out a sound. It was not a roar. It carried no challenge. It was a low, rolling call, brief and restrained, shaped more by breath than power. The sound traveled outward, flattening as it crossed the grass. The land answered. From the tall grass beyond the river's bend, movement stirred. Shapes separated from shadow, first one, then several. Lionesses emerged cautiously, bodies low, heads lifted to read the scene. A younger male followed, stopping short, muscles taut. They did not rush. They watched. The injured lion turned slightly, placing his body between the man and the approaching pride. The gesture was not aggressive. His ears were neutral, his stance protective without threat, as if marking a boundary rather than enforcing it. He stood there, bearing his weight with effort, breathing heavy but controlled. The man remained where he was, hands lowered, gaze soft. He did not look past the lion to the pride. He kept his attention where it belonged, on the animal who reminded himself to stay upright. "All right," he said quietly, more exhale than word. One of the lionesses stepped closer, nose lifting to catch the scent of blood and water. Another circled wide, eyes never leaving the man, assessing without alarm. The younger male held back, uncertain, tail twitching once before settling. There was no charge, no warning sound. Only watchfulness. The injured lion shifted again, wincing almost imperceptibly as he adjusted his stance. A lioness pressed briefly against his shoulder, grounding him, then stood beside him, her presence steady and calm. The contact drew a deeper breath from his chest, and his posture eased by degrees. The man slowly leaned back, increasing the distance without drawing attention to the movement. The lion did not follow him with his eyes. His focus stayed forward, on the pride, on the open plain that stretched beyond them. The exchange had ended without ceremony. As dusk settled fully now, the grass rippled with evening wind, and the pride gathered closer around their injured member. The man watched only long enough to see the lion remain standing, held in place by the quiet strength of others, before turning away. Behind him, the plain darkened, and ahead, the sky thinned to deep blue, carrying the last warmth of day as the land resumed its slow, steady breath. They moved as a single, careful body, the pride closing in around the injured lion without urgency. One lioness took the lead, stepping ahead and pausing often, reading the land. Another stayed pressed close to his flank, matching her pace to his uneven steps. The younger male drifted to the rear, watchful, head high. The injured lion walked last among them, not driven, not supported outright, but held within their presence, each step measured, deliberate. The wound pulled at him as he moved. His gait faltered once, then steadied. When he stopped, they stopped. When he shifted his weight, they adjusted, forming a quiet barrier between him and the open space behind. There was no sound beyond the soft drag of paws through grass and the low rush of breath. Their coordination was unspoken, shaped by long familiarity rather than command. The man did not follow. He remained where he was, standing still at the edge of the riverbank, allowing distance to grow naturally. His hands rested at his sides, empty now, his posture loose with the release of tension. He watched without lifting anything to record or mark the moment. This was not something to capture. It was something to let pass. As the pride moved farther out, their shapes softened, edges blurring with the grass and the dimming light. The injured lion's mane caught the last of the sun, a dull glow against the darkening plain, then faded as they crested a shallow rise. One lioness glanced back once, her head turning briefly, eyes steady, then returned her attention forward. The man waited longer than necessary, eyes tracing the place where they had disappeared. His breathing slowed, matching the calmer rhythm of the land. Around him, the savanna resumed its quiet motion. Insects lifted and settled. A distant bird called, then fell silent. The river moved on, unremarked, carrying thin reflections of the sky. There was no clear ending, no signal that marked the moment complete. Only absence, slowly filling with the ordinary life of the place. Grass bent under the evening wind. Dust settled back into the folds of the bank. The weight that had pressed the air earlier eased, replaced by the wide, patient stillness of night approaching. The man turned at last, walking back the way he had come, his steps unhurried. He did not look over his shoulder again. What needed watching was already beyond him, moving under its own strength toward shelter and shadow. Behind him, the horizon darkened to deep indigo. Somewhere far out on the plain, shapes moved together, indistinct now, carried by instinct and shared history. The savanna breathed on, holding the fading warmth of day, the grass whispering softly as the last light slipped away.